This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, and that's Andrew Gillis, and this is your Wednesday pod. We're doing a recruiting pod. We haven't done a recruiting pod in a while. Why haven't we done one? Because Ohio State was in the midst of a championship run, so recruiting didn't necessarily matter. But recruiting never stops, which is why the entire Ohio State football staff is on the road right now recruiting less than 10 days after winning a national title. Well, one of their coaches, their head coach Ryan Day, is also on a media tour throughout all that. I know you saw him on Jimmy Fallon. He showed up on a couple other national sports talk shows. He's been doing a lot. He's doing the stuff you do when you win. You become a personality. You become a media person. Ryan Day, are you ready, Andrew, for Ryan Day, the media personality? Are you excited about that idea?
I think everybody should be, because I saw many tweets about this, but people were saying, like, I've seen Ryan Day since 2018, and I've never seen him laugh like that, or I've never seen him this relaxed. And like, we also, like, there was the clip of the Michigan fan on the street who ran up to him, and like,
I thought that was corny.
That was very corny, I thought. Like, especially because, like, Ryan Day was trying to do a nice thing.
That's why it's corny.
And be like, hey, he was like, oh, I'm a big fan. Like, that's, you know, like, if you want to yell something, yell, whatever. It's, I don't know. I don't care. But, like, when you drag him over there, that was tough. But, like, Ryan Day's just, like, sitting there laughing on Jimmy Fallon and have a great time. And the amount of people I saw, fans, I saw some reporters tweet this that were like, man, he looks 1,000 pounds lighter. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what this, like, unleashed version of Ryan Day is now that you don't have the world's largest ball and chain around your neck.
You want to know where all that weight went? It was sitting on the table next to him, and it was gold.
No, you know where all that weight was? He threw it into the stands along with his headset after that happened. Yeah. He gave it the old heave ho into the front row.
And it's, if you've been in the building or around this program for a while and had a chance to really get a chance to know Ryan Day, you know this is not new Ryan Day. It's new to you, Ryan Day, because to your point, it's not a laughing matter when you're losing to Michigan and you're not winning Big Ten championships and you're not winning at national titles and people are calling for your job. Not a laughing matter. Right now, it can be a laughing matter because, yes, you lost your defensive coordinator. Yes, you have to come back home and get back on the road recruiting. But listen, so you're doing so with a ring on your finger. Not actually, they don't physically have the rings yet. That would be a very quick turnaround for those rings, which is why they should have stand-in rings.
Trophy yet? How are they going to have the rings? They don't even have the trophy from some of these games.
Okay, yeah. Before we get into, we're going to talk about recruiting, but if you know where the Cotton Bowl trophy is,
614-350-3315.
Yeah,
please let us know.
Actually getting worried about where this trophy is because I haven't seen it. They had a whole celebration on Sunday. No Cotton Bowl trophy. Stefan, who's not on this pod today, but he went to the basketball game on Monday because Caleb Downs and Jermaine Matthews and Sonny Styles were signing autographs, and the basketball team honored the football team in the middle of a halftime or whatever, a timeout or whatever. And one player's holding up the championship trophy. Another player's holding up the Rose Bowl trophy. And I'm like, dude, where's the Cotton Bowl trophy? Find the Cotton Bowl trophy. And then text us when you find it, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Don't send it to the Woody yet. Text us first. Because I'm getting worried. I'm like a worried grandmother right now. Where is the trophy? Where did you go?
Like when your kid's out past curfew, like 2 minutes, and you start immediately, your mind goes to a bad place.
What it is we all have people in our lives that love us, right, and care about us and ask us to check in every so often. So it's like getting on a flight and you're like, hey, mom and dad or significant other, I'm getting on my flight. Hey, mom and dad, I've made it to my hotel. It's that type of thing. Check in, Cotton Bowl Trophy. Let us know send us your location. I'm getting worried about that trophy. Anyway, one thing I'm not worried about is Ohio State's 2026 recruiting efforts. Even though they have the number 15 class in the country, they only have 4 commits in it right now. But again, when you're in the midst of a national championship run, this is not your focus. And now that the offseason is here, Andrew, outside of trying to get prepared for 2025, a lot of focus is going towards 2026 in that recruiting class where Chris Henry Jr., the number 6 player and the top wide receiver in the country, he headlines the class. Jacob Weatherspoon, number 139 player, number 9 cornerback out of Avon, Ohio. He is also in this class. Corbin Fordham, number 312 player, number 15 tight end out of Jacksonville, Florida. And then Jaden Ricketts, a number 426 player, number 64 wide receiver out of Pataskala, Ohio. That is their class right now. 2 receivers, a tight end, and a cornerback. That is such a weird way to start a class off. But listen, do what you got to do. Brian Hartline, Keenan Bailey, and Tim Walton doing their job per the usual. Those are not 3 guys who are necessarily worried about their recruiting efforts. What we're doing today is I asked Andrew to build the perfect 2026 recruiting class. He can use names, but he doesn't have to. But this is just more about structure. This is more about roster building. And we've seen years when Ohio State's taken 2 quarterbacks. We've seen years when they've taken 2 tight ends. We've seen 3 offensive lineman classes. We've seen 6 offensive lineman classes. We've seen 6 defensive lineman classes. We've seen 4. We've seen 2 linebacker classes. We've seen 4. All up and down the book. We've seen 3 running back classes, 2 running back classes, 1 running back class. This is about building a class that's going to both offset what you're going to lose after the 2025 season, but also a mixture of high-end players where it's like, okay, you should be on special teams in year 1, and by year 2, you should be ready to compete for a job, whether you win it or not, versus developmental guys. I'm making Andrew Gillis be Mark Pantoni and plan for the future. So, Andrew, I'm going to allow you to take us wherever you want to go. We can start wherever you want to go. We can, how many guys do you want? Well, first, let's do this. How many guys in this perfect recruiting class does Ohio State sign next December?
24.
24.
That's what I have right now.
24.
I have 24.
Okay.
And let's see. Funny enough, I have 12 on offense, 12 on defense. So I have a perfectly even split. We will talk about certain positions. And there are certain positions that you will hear my own personal opinion on it. Maybe that, I know that's what this pod is, but maybe that's, differing from, what you might think, or, maybe a conventional approach or something like that. But like, there are certain things that you might hear and go, huh? But I think as rosters expand, as you talk about Ohio State, there's just a couple positions, specifically one where it's like, well, there's no real time for a development player here, or there's no real time for, waiting here, or, who cares that you brought in a large number here? You got to win. So there are certain positions where I think, people might say, hey, I think we're good here. And I'm kind of maybe pushing for more of an aggressive approach.
So where do you want to start?
Let's just start with quarterback, because I think quarterback is the easiest one. So Brady Smigel, kid out of Newbury Park, California, 4-star player, number 63 overall in the class, number 5 quarterback. He was just visited by Chip Kelly. He lives in California, like I said. So Chip Kelly was not at the championship celebration. He had an excused absence because he was out in California. He was on the road recruiting. I know there is NFL interest swirling around him, but at least for Chip Kelly, he's got the Ohio State emblem on as he's out on the road and he's out recruiting. And, that was kind of the big story of Sunday for those that listened and for those that followed along on the text. We do appreciate it, but it was, hey, where's Knowles? And it was like, oh, I don't know where Knowles is. This might not be great. And very, very soon after the championship celebration ended, it was pretty clear. But Chip Kelly was out on the road recruiting this kid. For me, I mean, at quarterback, I know there are some people who are saying Julian Sand is the next great Ohio State quarterback. And there are some people who say, well, I don't think Sand's going to be that good, but I think Tavian St. Clair is going to be really good. And they think he's the next great Ohio State quarterback. You have Brady Edmonds, a 5-star in the 2027 class already locked in. I don't care. Bring in the best player you can. There's a kid, Jared Curtis, out there. He's the number 4 overall prospect, 5-star player, number 2 quarterback. The number 1 quarterback, Faison Brandon, out of North Carolina. He's committed to Tennessee. Dia Bell, the number 4 quarterback, he's committed to Texas. Ohio State was interested in him, but Curtis and Smigel seem to be the 2 kids. But like, that is the one thing I cannot emphasize enough, especially at quarterback. Bring in the best player you can. I don't care if you bring in the number 1 overall quarterback every single year, because look, I said the other day, I'm not in the business of telling kids they should transfer or, telling kids that they need to get out or anything like that, or trying to speculate on that, because that's their decision, man. Like, they are, making a professional decision at this point. But it's also, you kind of got to think to yourself, like, let's say they signed Jared Curtis or Brady Smigel or whoever, Julian Sand, Tavian St. Clair, let's say it's Smigel, and then Brady Edmonds. Those 4 quarterbacks in a 4-year span is a great run. You cannot expect all 4 of those quarterbacks to end their careers at Ohio State. You cannot expect all 4 of them to finish up their athletic careers as Buckeyes, because that's just not the way the quarterback position works. Bring in the best player you can. If they think that's Smigel, wonderful for them. He's 6'5", 205. That would kind of continue that whole, like, let's get really, really big at the quarterback position. Edmonds is a big kid. Tavian's a big kid. Brady's a big kid. Even Jared Curtis is 6'4", 225. So if you bring in one of those kids, then that's fine. But at quarterback, forget we're going to take a development kid here. Hey, we can slow play this kid's development and we'll see where we're at after 2 seasons. No. Bring in the best kid you can every single year. Try to win every single year. Try to get the best quarterback, because you have to just think to yourself, like, what could happen with this year's quarterback class could happen. You have 1 player go pro, and then you have 2 players go, I got to get out of here. And then where are you at? So for me, forget development, forget, you need this kid to play. Just bring in the best kid you can, and then if 2 kids leave because you bring in a freshman superstar who's going to play 3 years for you, like Trevor Lawrence did at Clemson, oh no. So yeah, that's where I stand at quarterback. That's my little mini rant on that position. Take the best kid.
So I would classify that as, given the way Ohio State's recruited quarterbacks since Ryan Day took over the program, CJ Stroud was a top 100 recruit. Jack Miller was a top 100 recruit before obviously injuries got in the way and derailed his career. Kyle McCord was a 5-star recruit. Quinn Ewers was a 5-star recruit. Devin Brown was a top 100 recruit. Really more top 60 for him and CJ Stroud. Obviously with Lincoln Keenholz, a lower rated guy, but then you follow that up in 2024 with Aaron Nolan, who's a top 80 recruit, and Julian Sand obviously transfers from Alabama. He's a 5-star recruit, and you had Dylan Raiola as the commitment there. He's a 5-star recruit at one point. 2025, Tavian St. Clair is a 5-star recruit. You just mentioned Brady Edmonds in 2027. He's a 5-star recruit. And then the guy you used as an example here, Brady Smigel, number 63 overall, number 5 in his recruiting class. He's the highest rated non-5-star in the 2025 recruiting class. So by that logic, I would define, in this perfect class, the quarterback needs to be top 60 recruit or higher. Just when you base that off of what you just said and the way Ohio State has recruited their position, every single quarterback they have signed was a top 60 recruit at some point in their career when they were fully healthy, except one. So is that the right classification to use there? Top 60 recruit or higher, essentially. And I know if you're 63, obviously that's a top 60 recruit.
Yeah.
That's we don't have to get bogged down in semantics. The point of the matter is, if there are 7 top 100 quarterbacks in the 2026 recruiting class, you're essentially saying one of those quarterbacks needs to be at Ohio State.
Yeah, I think that should be the goal every year. I don't think you should go into it with the plan of saying, oh, hey, look, let's take the developmental kid, right? Let's take the kid who's not going to be ready for 3 years because, we want to see where he's at, right? We want to see where things go and just we'll reassess. With that said, I think like the top 100 should probably be your goal. You want to bring in like a top 100 quarterback every single cycle because judging by how those quarterback rankings typically go, you're typically getting an Elite 11 quarterback pretty much every single year. Like you should always be represented at Elite 11. Maybe that's the better example. You should always have a kid who, is there rather than a kid who's like kind of on the fringe of getting it. But like I said, with that said, maybe Jared Curtis looks at I know he just backed off a Georgia commitment a couple of weeks ago. Maybe he looks at the Georgia quarterback situation and goes, huh, interesting. Julian Sand, Tavian St. Clair. Gunnar Stockton. I could go play at Georgia. And maybe Brady Smigel, who, just listed a couple of different schools that he's interested in. Maybe he looks at it and says the same thing. And then you're forced to take a kid like a Nathan Bernhardt, a kid out of Ashland, who's a 4-star player, number 339 overall in the class, number 24 quarterback in the composite rankings, who does not have an Ohio State offer. Ohio State seems interested in him. They one of their staffers, Billy Fessler, was out to see him today. So Ohio State has kept tabs on Bernhardt. So like, not saying, taking him is a failure. It's just the goal should be to get as high of a rated as a recruited quarterback as you possibly can. I think, if you go in saying, hey, if we have to take the, 475th overall quarterback because we want him to develop for 3 years and then we'll see. No, that shouldn't be your plan. But if you end up with Bernhardt because you like him and because some of the other kids said no, like obviously Jared Curtis and Brady Smigel are at the top of their list right now. But like if some of those kids say no and you end up with Bernhardt, that doesn't mean it's a failure. I just don't think that should be the goal where you're taking a kid where you're like, all right, let's take the long track here.
I do wonder if Curtis visits because he's already locked in visits with Oregon, Georgia, and South Carolina, which kind of makes the Georgia decommitment a little weird. Like what happened over there that he decommitted, or was it just simply? I wonder if this is a kid who gets really close with the position coaches, and so when they leave, it kind of resets everything for him because that's what happened with Ohio State. Is Corey?
I was going to say, yeah, exactly.
He reset, and I'm wondering, did Georgia lose a staffer, and so Jared Curtis went? I don't know, man.
I would have to go look at that. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and decided to decommit, but he's still in the process. He hasn't scheduled one with Ohio State yet, but I don't think Ohio State scheduled any official visits for 2026 guys yet, so that's not necessarily a big of a deal. I'll say this: if that kid decommits from Georgia and he ends up at Ohio State or Oregon, that is a huge win in the Big Ten column. That a 5-star quarterback just looked at the SEC and said, nope, I'm going north, whether it's Pacific North or Midwest North. Fine. So one quarterback. No, was there any consideration for you to maybe they need to add 2 quarterbacks simply because their room might get a little small here very quickly?
No, because you're going to bring in a 26 quarterback. So, you're going to have a situation where you have Keenholz, and St. Clair. Maybe they bring in like a veteran. Like we've brought up the name Tristan Gebbia a lot.
Yeah.
You just kind of have an adult in the room, like a 5th-year guy who's like, hey, we would really love for you to come compete for a backup spot. And you can be one play away from being the starting quarterback at Ohio State. But like, just to be real here, kid, you're not going to be the starter here unless something goes wrong. So it's like, maybe you bring in that kid and it's a 5th-year senior, but it's like, if you have 4 this year, if Julian Sand and Tavian St. Clair or Lincoln Keenholz are not your starting quarterback in 2026, or at least you're not confident about them as your starting quarterback in 2026, it's like, what are you doing? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
So one to me is the answer. I don't think 2 is the correct choice because it's so difficult, especially when you want to go big game hunting like Ohio State is, to say, hey, we're going to bring in the best quarterbacks we can. And then also we're going to try to bring in another kid. Like if you sign Smigel and he's a top 70 kid, I don't know what the motivation would be for another quarterback who's, lower rated or, who else is in the class for that second kid to sign on.
The only other time Ohio State's truly done it since Ryan Day took over was 2020. And again, circumstances put them in a position where they had to go get another quarterback. One, to get the room to 4 in 2020, but also because maybe injuries had gotten in the way for Jack Miller and he wasn't developing the way that you thought he was going to continue to progress. And CJ Stroud just happened to pop up in July. So maybe it's a situation where that's not an easy thing to ask Andrew to do right now, because if I was asking Andrew to do this in January of 2019, he would have had to be Nostradamus to even mention CJ Stroud, because he wasn't on anybody's radar at this point. So that's fine. They did it in 2021 too, but that was more because randomly Quinn Ewers and NIL stuff happened. He was a 2022 quarterback. Okay. So one quarterback has to be an Elite 11 guy. Makes total sense. You can't have your program be built off quarterbacks the way that Ryan Day built his program off of and then go get the number 400 quarterback in the country. It just doesn't make any sense. Running back, you're coming off of a class where you just got 3, and 4 of the 5 in your room are in year 2 or younger. What does Carlos Loughlin need in 2026?
I think he needs 2.
Okay.
He was recently on the road. As we do this podcast, we're doing this podcast on Tuesday. He was recently on the road today, Tuesday. Savion Hyder. He is a 5-star running back prospect. He's the number 1 running back in the 2026 class. Louisa County out of in Virginia. Shout out Virginia kids. I always like when they recruit him. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, man, that's going to make it real easy. Like if I go home to see my parents or something like that, it's going to be like, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to be gone for 3 hours. I got to go drive an hour south and I'm going to go talk to Savion. I'll be back. See you later. Which is why I was hoping they were going to recruit maybe a little bit more heavily than they did Connor Salmon, kid out of Loudoun County, which is where I'm from. So I was like, I'm just like, man, if they could just like set up a hub in Virginia, that would be great for me personally. Anyway, Savion Hyder, kid out of Virginia. I think he's obviously their number 1 target right now. But they've got a lot of other options. Derek Cooper's in that mix. Jonathan Hatton, kid out of Texas. Like Jonas Walton, I think is someone that they're in the mix as well. Like we'll see kind of how this room shakes out, but I think it's pretty clear that Hyder is maybe at the top of that list. I think you need 2 here, and I think you need 1 kid that you probably feel pretty good about playing spot reps eventually, because after this year, after this year, and I meant 2025. After the 2025 season, it's so quick how that turns. After 2025, Donaldson's going to be gone, so you're going to have a one and done with him. You're going to have James Peoples, Bo Jackson, Turbo Rogers, and Isaiah West, and that's 4, and that's not counting any transfers, right? So that's assuming that everybody's still in your room.
I would not assume that all 4 of those guys are back next season. We just have to be real about things. It's similar to the quarterback conversation of you have 3 guys in your room right now. This time next year, I don't expect all 3 of them to be there. Yeah. I would expect the loser of this quarterback bout. I would expect Tavian St. Clair to still be here because this is year 1 for him. But between Julian Sand and Lincoln Keno, I don't think both of them will be here next January.
Exactly. If Julian Sand is the starter, like, again, I'm not going to get in the business of telling people to stay. Maybe Lincoln Keno says, I want to stay here and I'm going to transfer as a grad transfer. Do you, man? Live your life. Do what you want to do. I more than happy for him, whatever he decides to do. But I would just say that he's not going to play. Like, if Julian Sand is the starting quarterback, he's younger than Lincoln, he's not going to play. So in that situation, like, in 2025, you're going to go Donaldson and Peoples as your 1-2 punch. I think that is what they hope to be their new Travion and Quinshon. Now, those are lofty goals. I don't know if you're going to get Travion and Quinshon. You could make a very real case that those 2 guys are like RB2, RB3. And the only reason they're not 1 is because somebody named Ashton Genty lived in Boise, Idaho this year. So that's kind of the only thing that kept them from that mix, right? Like, Ashton Genty was awesome. And I think that I think he's the pretty clear guy. So it's like, all right, are we it's not knocking Donaldson or Peoples. It's just like, man, your RB production is just, the talent is going to be a little bit down. So it's like, okay, so if that's your 1-2 punch, and then Bo Jackson is your 3, and then Weston Rogers are like your 4-5 kind of mix, that's fine for 25. I think you need 2 though, because once Donaldson goes, if your 1-2 punch in 26 is third year James Peoples, second year Bo Jackson, your number 3 is West, and then Rogers is like a 4. I think you need 2, because here's the thing with Turbo Rogers. Turbo Rogers is 5'8", 190. Definitely stocky, and people in the program have told me he can run between the tackles better than you think. Like, I think we have kind of done this, and I think a lot of other people have kind of done this. They've tried to put him into this category of he's a gadget player, and maybe in this world where the rosters expand, you have a little bit more freedom. I think Ryan Day even said that after signing day, where you can have a little bit more of a flex player where, maybe he plays the slot, maybe he goes in the backfield certain times. I think Ohio State really likes him as a running back, but I don't think he's going to be used in the same way that a James Peoples. I think that's fair to say. I don't think anybody would, take issue with that. So with that said, you need to kind of count him as a flex player, and then you might only have James Peoples, Bo Jackson, and Isaiah West, and it's like, all right, well, if all 3 of those guys are there, you probably want somebody else to back them up that can play, and then maybe you take a player who, hey, we need a year. Just give him a year, and then we'll figure it out. So for me, I need 2. I would need 2, and then I want a player that can play right away. I think, of a James Peoples or a Bo Jackson, a player where it's like, you know what? We're not going to give you the ball 150 times in your freshman year, but we might give you the ball 40 times. Might give you the ball 35 times. When we're up 52-0 on, who do they play in 2026? Whoever their non-conference opponent. No, that's Ohio's in.
Yeah,
Ohio's in 25. So it's like whoever we're up on Ball State. I don't know if Ball State's on the schedule. We're up on Ball State 52-0. Okay, let's put in. Let's empty the bench here. That to me is the key. They do play Ball State. They do play Ball State in 2026. That was a complete guess by me. So it's like, yeah, we need somebody to play, the Ball State reps. We need the guy to say, you know what, James Peoples, put your feet up. We need you for Texas the next week, because they do go to Texas in 2026. So for me, that is what I need. That is what I would want. I would want 2 and 1 kid that can play right away.
So essentially what you're talking about is what Ohio State did in 2021 with Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor, where Travion ended up being the starter, but the whole point of the matter is they brought in 2 guys, both of them pretty highly rated. One of them knew year 1 was a developmental year, while the other one knew, hey, there's an opportunity here for you to go do something. Travion turned it into him being a starter. It doesn't mean he had to. If Mylan Williams and Master Teague had been, highly productive running backs in 2021, maybe Travion Henderson wouldn't have taken that job, but he did. And it's a little easier, I think, for freshmen at running back to do that maybe than any other position. Maybe wide receiver, I would throw that up there as well, because it's not anything against those positions. It's just, it's a lot more raw talent than some other positions are. So that's essentially what you're talking about. 2021, they need a Travion Henderson and need an Evan Pryor. I don't hate that. In fact, I don't hate Lachlan taking 2 backs every year going for, because you want 5. And again,
kids are going to leave, and you can diversify your skill set. And I think that is important. Like look at what Ohio State was able to do in 2024. Now, one of the things that we have to do as journalists is kind of sift through some of the stuff that Ohio State people tell us, right? And one of the things that we heard a lot was, well, Travion and Quinshon, they can do the same things. They can be used the same way. Well, they didn't really do that. There was a clear delineation of Quinshon's going to run between the tackles more for us, and Travion's going to hit the edge more for us. And that's exactly it. Like, you can have a more bruiser running back. Like, I think you have that with Donaldson this year. Like, Donaldson doesn't, I don't think, have that, like, breakaway speed of, like, Travion Henderson. But, dang, if that guy isn't a bowling ball to tackle. So, yeah, I think you need kind of 2 running backs, because the diversification of skill sets there are very, very important. Like, I think if you're recruiting, defensive ends, you're not necessarily looking for, okay, we need one speed rusher and one power rusher. We need a guy who's,
I do that.
6'5". What's that?
I do that on college football 20.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not looking at going, hey, we need a guy who's 6'5" and 290 as our edge rusher, and then on the other end we need a guy who's 6'4" and 242. Like that, you're not doing that unless you're playing a video game, unless you have the sticks between your controllers or between your hands. Like that's not what you're trying to do. So I think at running back, you can diversify your skill set pretty uniquely. And I think that I love what Carlos Lachlan has done. Carlos Lachlan has done a really, really good job because I think you look at where this running back room is now. You bring in Donaldson, you bring in Bo Jackson, you bring in Isaiah West, and then you throw in the curveball with Turbo Rogers. It's a really good job. He's done a really, really good job, I think, in his first year.
Yeah, so how I structure my recruiting in college football 25, I'm so serious. I do this. So how, because Andrew, you play the game, and other people who play the game, if you don't, I'm sorry. But I'm a millennial. I have to do this.
We are in an online dynasty, so we're in an online dynasty together. You might be spilling some state secrets here.
Not really. I'm at Pitt right now. I can't really recruit. I have to scheme until I get to a better school.
I'm at East Carolina. You want to talk about
I left immediately. I left Florida. Listen, I had the first 10-win season in Florida International University's history, and I said, I'm leaving. And I'm going to leave Pittsburgh at some point. I'm going to leave. You know how there's groomers around coaches every year about leaving? Believe them, Pittsburgh fans. The virtual ones, not the real ones. I don't do anything with Pittsburgh in real life. But I get 2 run stoppers at defensive end. And they're my starting defensive ends. And then you know how you have the rush end, which essentially is the people who are at nickel. I get speed and power rushers just for those. So I end up playing a lot of depth pieces. Listen, I know how to do this. Ryan, listen, if you have an opening for virtual recruiter, I'm your guy. And I won't ask for $3.1 million. I'll ask for like 1.1 or something like that. Okay, let's do the last two skill positions and let's take a break. Ohio State already has 2 wide receivers committed. So I'm sure that maybe changed the math of how you wanted to go about that. So this is less of a how many should they get total and more of a how many more should Brian Hartline go get in 2026 to pair with a 3-star recruit who has the Brian Hartline stamp, so we know he's not going to end his career as a 3-star recruit, and a 5-star recruit who has the Brian Hartline stamp, but also he looks like the second coming of Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, it's this was an interesting one. I originally had 2, and then I changed it to 3. I think this is hey, great if you get another one, but it's not a prerequisite because you have Chris Henry Jr. and you have Ricketts. Like in 2026, Jeremiah Smith is still going to be on this football team. So there's one. You have one spot. Carnell Tate might be gone. Brandon Innes might be gone.
I'd say more Tate than Ennis right now with their career trajectory, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they both explode in 2025, and it's a crazy year for Julian Sayin, and all of a sudden it's like they have the most efficient passing attack, and all of a sudden you're looking at those 2 guys and people are like, Brandon Innes is just Jackson Smith-Njigba reincarnated. And like people are just ready to say they have 2 first-round picks at receiver, and then they're like, all right, guys, see ya, we're out of here. Maybe that's the case. I mean, that's the way that Brian Hartline recruits the room. But you need, I think, you have to. You feel great about Chris Henry. Jaden Ricketts, obviously, I'll never forget, he committed during the Northwestern game or right after the Northwestern game at Wrigley Field. I remember I was sitting in the press box when he did that. We were live on the podcast. So you have 2. I think it's 3 if you can get it. I think, you shouldn't necessarily be just emptying the NIL funds to go get some kids because you already have 2 that you feel great about. You certainly are going to need to try to retain Chris Henry Jr. Oregon, it feels like it is just like borderline harassing him at this point.
I'm glad you said it, not me.
Like every week it feels like it's, Oregon's letting him know something, or, Oregon's tweeting about him, or you see an Oregon writer do an interview with him, or Chris Henry Jr. Like, and I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be like pessimistic towards Oregon or like optimistic towards Ohio State here, but like he has taken visits there. Like, it's not like he's just like, oh yeah, thanks for the interest. Yeah, thanks. He's taken interest, he's reciprocated that, but I don't think it's going to happen as long as Brian Hartline's here.
he also lives in Los Angeles, California. So
Yeah,
the flight to Eugene is not really that long
it's
of
like
a
2
flight.
hours. Yeah.
It's
So
you don't know what I think this is, and it's nothing against Oregon at all. In fact, Oregon is a much more formidable opponent on the recruiting trail right now than Miami is. That's just fact, given where their programs are.
yeah.
He lives
So
on the West Coast.
yeah.
So when you're
So
saying he's yeah, for sure. Chris Henry is doing visits. Also, we don't have to beat around the bush with stuff anymore. Kids are getting paid to go on visits. That has been a thing in the ecosphere since NIL became a thing of, hey, come take whatever amount of money to come take a visit. And I'm not saying Oregon is doing that, and I'm not saying they're not doing it either. I'm saying that is a known thing at this point. Everywhere you scour the universe with the recruiting is that there are kids who are taking visits because they're getting paid to take that visit because they can. That's the world we live in. But that's not the point I want to make.
so yeah.
The
So
point I actually want to make about Chris Henry Jr. is the very point we had to spend a year making about Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith didn't do a lot of interviews in high school. And when he did, it was because someone was right there and they put a camera in his face and he was nice enough to not say no. So what ended up happening was you got a lot of guys who are recruiting writers for Miami and Florida State and Florida and all those schools down there. They're not going to ask him Ohio State questions. They're going to ask him a Florida State question or a Miami question or a Florida question or a Georgia question or whatever question. He wasn't really talking to Ohio State writers because we weren't right there in his face. And then Matt Parker, who formerly worked for Letterman Row, when he was out there at the opening in California, he was really the first person that got a chance to talk to JJ from the Ohio State sphere. So it's really one of the few stories from his high school days that you see him talking extensively about Ohio State. And what happened? He ended up signing. Here's what I think is happening with Chris Henry Jr., the exact same thing. He lives out in California. So USC writers and Oregon writers and UCLA writers and whatever else is out there on the West Coast, right? Washington writers, that's who's asking him questions. And so, of course, he's talking about Oregon. He's talking about whatever school is in his ecosystem because he's not a guy who just does a lot of interviews. So it's a good thing that he comes in camps every June for Brian Hartline. It's a good thing every time he comes back east. But also, Brian Hartline is still employed in Columbus. So until that changes, I don't think there's a reason to think Chris Henry Jr. isn't going to make it to signing day, no matter who else gets involved in his recruitment, especially when he just watched what JJ did as a true freshman. And he went and he can go, oh, I might be generational too. And if they're going to do that with JJ, why would I not think they would do that with me?
yeah. So for me, I have 3. I think 3 would be good just because you never know what the position is going to be. Maybe like I said, maybe Tate goes and Ennis goes, and then all of a sudden the room is in a bit of a different position. Like you have Bodpin Miller on your depth chart right now. He's never really played receiver in a full-time role. They love his athleticism. They love what he could do, but he played quarterback at Ontario High School up in Mansfield. Like he's going to have to learn the position against kids that, have been playing receiver for a decade. So, there are guys on the roster where you're like, all right, Bodpin Miller might take a little bit. Damarian Witten, is a player that is now like with the receivers, but we'll see how he develops. And I think if you've ever gone out to dinner with somebody, like I feel like I'm out to dinner with Brian Hartline, and like you go to a restaurant you've never been to before, and you just kind of look at them and you're like looking at the menu like, wow, this all looks good. I don't really know what to get. And the person with extreme confidence just says, I got it. Let me order for the table. Let me order a bunch of appetizers for the table. I'm just going to trust their opinion. Like if Brian Hartline goes, hey, we're going to order some Brody Keefe. We're going to put Brody Keefe out here. I want Brody Keefe on my roster. All right. Sure. Take him. if we want to take Chris Henry Jr., Caden, if we want to take Chris Henry Jr.'s teammate, Caden Dixon Wyatt out of Modern Day. Okay. Yeah, sure. I'll take it. Why not? I trust your opinion. You know what you're doing. So I think this is a very unique situation where if you want to take a long-term project, I'm cool with it. If you want to take hey, this dude's amazing, I'm cool with it. There's a lot of really, really highly rated recruits that Ohio State is after and that Ohio State can bring in. But you kind of have to just trust Brian Hartline's opinion here. So I think they have maybe a little bit more of a long-term project with Jaden Ricketts. He's a little bit smaller of a receiver, Pataskala kid, like I said. We'll see if his recruiting ranking does kind of skyrocket, but it's also important to remember in the 2027 class, you also have a 5-star recruit as well. They already have the receiver position kind of locked down for a bunch of years. So you've got Chris Henry Jr., like you're just kind of loaded at that position. So if Brian Hartline says, "Hey, I want this," you're like, "All right, cool. Do what you got to do." Tight end's a much more simple answer. Will Kazmarek and Max Clare, I don't think are going to be on the roster in 2026.
No.
Max Clare, I believe, is going to have an extra year, and he could come back to Ohio State for 2026. I just don't envision that. I think this sounds meaner than I mean it. I think he was more of a hired gun.
With
I think
John Judkins.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's tight end Quinshon Judkins, where it's like, you know what? He came here for 1 year and went, Purdue sucks. I'm going to try and win some games at Ohio State, and I'm going to try and beat an offense that knows how to throw the football. Purdue was bad. I don't care. They were awful. So it's like he's going to come to a great offense and an offense loaded with skill position players. And then you have, assuming Kazmarek and Clare are gone, you have Christian, Thurman, LeBlanc, Brody Lennon, and Nate Roberts. I think you only need one tight end.
Okay.
And I think it's whatever tight end you feel most comfortable with. They certainly have a type at tight end. They are very, very interested in a lot of kids that are like 6'5", 6'6". Like they're, the bigger bodies, Evan Jacobson is a kid who's 6'7". Like I know they have Fordham already in the class. So it's like, if you don't hang on to him, those are some of the kids. But if you just keep Fordham, I think you're good. I think when Ohio State started out in 2025, from my understanding, Nate Roberts was going to be the only tight end in the class. And they went, hey, Brody Lennon, this kid's pretty good. And I think they're going to use him in a little bit of a different way. So if my understanding is correct, they went in going, we only need 1 in 25. And then they eventually took 2. Now, I think when you look at in 26, it's like, okay, I think we're good with 1. And I think Fordham is going to be that kid.
And that's back-to-back years where they had their tight end, and then there was an Ohio kid that was an intriguing prospect to them, and they took him. So I do wonder if they do that again this year. Corbin Fordham's their guy. But if they continue to watch Ohio kids and some of those kids camp and they watch film, it's like, okay, that's intriguing.
Maybe they're just too good to pass, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just he's a long-term project, right? But you like what you've got there because that's what it is with Demarion Witten, and that's what happened with this past class as well. Is Brody Lennon. It's 2 guys where, okay, let's take some Ohio guys. The rosters are expanding. This is probably a guy we wouldn't have taken 2 or 3 years ago simply because we don't have the space, but now we might have the space for him. So I think you're right. They've already found their one tight end, and so now this becomes a conversation of like, let's just see who camps this summer, and maybe Keenan Bailey feels like, oh, I'll bring that guy in and see what happens there, and maybe I won't. Let's take our first break at the 42-minute mark. Off-season, man, that means these pods are getting longer. We'll come back from the break, and we'll hit up the trenches here on Buckeye Talk.
This episode is brought to you by FedEx. FedEx knows running a small business is hard enough without the hassle of shipping. That's why there's FedEx One Rate. With FedEx One Rate, you can ship your holiday packages cheaper than the post office for as low as $14.50 for small boxes. Visit FedEx.com/OneRate for details. Exclusions apply. Valid through January 19th, 2025. FedEx One Rate. 2-day retail shipping, 1 flat rate.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Andrew Gillis. It's a recruiting pod, and Andrew is building Ohio State's perfect recruiting class, and it's simply just based on what they need. He said 24 players total, 12 on offense, 12 on defense. We've hit quarterback in the skill positions, and now it's time to move into the trenches. Did you separate tackle and interior offensive line on yours, or did you just put it all together?
No, I put 5 offensive linemen.
Okay,
because I think let's just get into it. I put 5 offensive linemen because I think we have seen with Justin Fry, this offensive line class is loaded in the state of Ohio. Maxwell Riley, he's down to Clemson and Ohio State, and it sounds like he wants to make a decision here in March. He's going to take a couple more visits. He was at the celebration for Ohio State's national championship. I don't know if that means anything. It certainly means he's interested. He has told me multiple times that he'll play anywhere, and Ohio State kind of thinks that too. He could play interior. He could play tackle. He played left tackle at Avon Lake. He moved to the right side whenever they go unbalanced. He can play a lot of different positions. Sam Greer out of Hoban is specifically a tackle. I think he's like 6'6". He's a big kid. I really like him at tackle, but he's a number 224 overall prospect. Adam Guthrie, Justin Fry just went and visited him. He's an offensive tackle out of Miami Trace. So it's like, if you get Guthrie and Greer, those are your tackles, and then all of a sudden, you've got two really good tackles out of the state of Ohio. Guthrie is a kid, I think, who started, and, when his ranking first kind of started, it was, kind of lower. And now you're seeing him really start to rise a little bit. So it's like, man, Riley, Greer, Guthrie, that's a hell of a 1-2-3 punch at tackle and maybe even on the interior, because if you have Greer and Guthrie, I think you're kicking Riley inside. I think you're starting him at guard and seeing where it goes. Micah Smith is another kid who's very, very interested in Ohio State. Out of Vero Beach, TJ Alford's teammate. I think he's genuinely interested in Ohio State. And every time I've talked to him, I think that's like 2 or 3 times at this point, he has kind of raved about Ohio State. He's been up here a couple of times. It's just, when you look at this class, I think you need 5 for where the room is going to be. I think I'm taking 5 every single year, but Anyawa, the kid they just brought out of Rice, he's going to be gone after this year, I believe, after 2025. So then it's like, okay, well, Philip Daniels is going to be.
I think he's got 2 or 3 years left.
I think Philip Daniels technically could leave because he's going to be a redshirt sophomore.
Correct.
So like, if Philip Daniels plays like Paris Johnson, maybe he's gone. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. So it's like, I guess technically you still might have, you could have both those tackle transfers go after year 1. I don't think that's going to happen though with Daniels. So it's like, all right, well then at that point, is Carter Lowe ready in year 2? Is Ian Moore ready in year 3? One of the Armstrong twins, is that ready in year 3 to play tackle? Like, you're at that kind of position where it's like, okay, I think maybe we're okay. So if I had to delineate, I'm probably looking at like 3 tackles and 2 on the interior. I think an ideal class for them would be Greer, Guthrie, Micah Smith, Maxwell Riley, and then whoever else you can get. I really liked Darius Gray, top 50 kid out of Virginia, who looked really, really good against Jakeem Stewart at that one summer camp. He just released his official visits. He has 5 of them. Ohio State's not on that list. So I think it might be fair to say that Ohio State is kind of on the outside looking in of that recruitment. That was a kid I really thought Ohio State could, do well to recruit. And I know he's visited a couple of times. I think he was here for the Michigan game, which, oops, maybe I'm not saying that swayed his opinion one way or the other, but that just probably wasn't the game that you wanted him here for. So yeah, I'm looking at, I think, like 3 tackles and maybe 2 on the interior, because for me, and maybe Justin Fry doesn't view it this way, maybe other people don't view it this way, I would recruit tackles, and if you have to kick them inside, you have to kick them inside, because I think, especially where Ohio State's interior is right now, you have Carson Hinsman and Luke Montgomery and Tegra Shabola and Josh Padilla and Austin Saraville and Devontae Armstrong and Jake Cook. And it sounds like McFadden's going to play tackle at first. I think McFadden might end up as an interior player, but we'll see. Then you have Gabe Van Sickle. You've got options on the interior. The options are more limited on the edge. So I'm bringing in 3 tackles. Those would be the guys that I would hone in on: Greer, Guthrie, and Smith. And man, it's like, how the narrative can change with one great recruiting class from Justin Fry would be crazy, because he has already done a bang-up job getting those guys ready to play, like we saw this past year. And it's like, all of a sudden, if you pair a great recruiting class with that, whew, that's awesome. So 5 for me is the answer.
I'm looking at Ohio State's offer sheet. 6'7.5", 6'6.5", 6'3.5", 6'7", 6'6", 6'5", 6'5.5", 6'5", 6'6.5", 6'7", 6'7", 6'5", 6'7", 6'6", 6'3", 6'4", 6'6", 6'5", 6'4". There are some large human beings in this class.
Yeah, granted, these are all offensive linemen. They're all large human beings.
Well, no,
but
no,
I
no,
know
no. But that's
these
not
are large offensive linemen.
That's but like, there's such thing as like, is he a true tackle or is he a guy who's a guard in the NFL? And I do feel like, Andrew, you've been out there for the camps one time. There's been a lot of years where it's felt like there are guys who are, they're being recruited as a tackle, but they're probably a guard. There's a lot of Josh Fryers who have come through Ohio State in recent years where I don't know if Josh Fry is a tackle in the NFL. I think he might end up being a guard in the NFL. And I think, like Luke Montgomery, they started him out at tackle. He ended up very quickly being a guard. Tegra Shabola has the size of a tackle, but he's clearly a guard, at least in Ohio State's mind. So that's what I'm saying. There seem to be a lot of guys who, from a size standpoint, when you go, are they a tackle or a guard? No. That's a true tackle. Now, it doesn't mean that all of them in year 2 or year 3 is going to be ready to play. Like Adam Guthrie might not be ready to go in year 2. He might not be ready to go in year 3, but he has the size of a true tackle. And I think that's what's been missing for Ohio State. That's why they've run into situations where the last couple of years, it's like, where are your tackles? Well, they're all playing guard, which is hilarious because in 2021, to your point of they should recruit a lot of tackles. And if you move them inside, you move them inside. Their offensive line was a center and 4 tackles. So they had too many tackles in 2021. Now they don't have any tackles. They have a bunch of guards, which is a good thing for their interior, but it doesn't necessarily help their pass pro all the time. So looking at the sizes of a lot of these guys, you're talking about Maxwell Riley, who's 6'5", 280. He'll obviously need to put on like 40 pounds before he plays football at Ohio State. But
I don't even know about 40, but he needs to put on some weight.
I mean, if you go look at Ohio State's starting offensive line throughout the years, a lot of them are 310 to 315. So fine, 35 pounds. Maxwell, 5 pounds less. Congratulations. You don't have to eat that last burger at 11:30 at night. But he's probably going to have a Nicholas Petit-Frere like development where we're going to get to year 2 with him. You're like, hey, Max, how you going? He said, listen, I'm full and they keep feeding me food. I don't have any room to put the food in my belly. But they want me to keep eating because I'm only 298. And that's fine. That's nothing to do with his talent. That's just putting on weight. That's, again, some of this he's just going to put on because he's 17 years old right now. So 17-year-old Maxwell Riley at Avon Lake versus 21-year-old Maxwell Riley in Columbus, Ohio. 2 very different people. Or Clemson. I don't know where he's going to end up yet. Because we have to do it, I have to ask the question. You didn't mention Jackson Cantwell, who's the number 3 player, number 1 tackle in the country, and then Emmanuel.
I was going to bring him up at the very end.
Okay, those 2, just for the sake of, those are the 2 5-star tackles in this class. Any opening to Justin Fry, look what he just did with this offensive line. I know Jackson Cantwell visited in December. Any opening for those 2? I'm not going to say it's a disappointment if he doesn't get either one of those 2 players. I'm more just asking simply because those are the best 2 players in the country at their position. Is there any chance that Justin Fry gets them?
Jackson Cantwell seems genuinely interested.
Okay.
The kid out of Nixon, Missouri. So we'll see. He took a visit to Ohio State during like that weird period between the end of the regular season and the start of the college football playoff. He did Ohio State on one day, and then he did Michigan on the very next day. As you could imagine, every program in the country wants him. Oregon was at his school the other day. It's just a nonstop stream of visitors right now for him. So for me, you take him no matter what. And if you get him, oh boy, and then you figure out the rest later. If you have 5 offensive linemen in your class and Jackson Cantwell says, hey, Justin, I want to play at Ohio State.
Well, then you have 6.
Then you have 6. Exactly. Then you say, okay, come on in, buddy. We'll take you. And then you start to go, can we put 6 offensive linemen on the field and then just have 3 receivers and just have everybody block?
Tackle
Or maybe
eligible.
we make somebody a tight end and we just have everybody block and
No,
then we just
no.
send 3 receivers out.
Put that 40 number on them and make him a tackle eligible. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they did it with Donnie.
So Cantwell is the kid where you take. Cantwell can't miss. We'll see.
I'm going to let you have that. I only ask because I think for the narrative for me this year is going to be with those 2 guys. I like how you said that. They need to get 5 guys. And if they get Cantwell, well, then they have 6. They're bonuses, not absolutes. And I think last year we talked about David Sanders a lot. Like, he was an absolute. Like, you absolutely have to get this guy and not a bonus. And that's because of how the offensive line class shaped out. But if they get if they get 5 other guys, especially with a lot of them being from Ohio, and then you throw Cantwell can be a cherry on top instead of we have a cheeseburger and we still don't have a patty. I want to pair defensive line and linebacker because I think the numbers that we would have had on these 2 positions in the previous years versus I think where these numbers are now might be drastically different if we think Ohio State's about to change its defensive scheme a little bit, especially if they're not going to be married to the 4 down front. Did you take that into account at all with this in terms of the number of guys they need at linebacker and defensive line?
Well, so let's just go D-line first. I put 4.
Okay.
And I had 2 DNs, 2 D tackles, and that is kind of with the understanding of just like we don't know what their defense is going to look like exactly because we had talked for a couple of years about this like crazy idea of this thing called the jack, and are you going to use it? Like Justin Hill went on a podcast recently at Alabama and was basically like, yeah, like Jim Knowles was showing me all these clips of them using it and then they just never used it. So like I felt they had a better development plan for me at Alabama. It was strictly business. And like I respected him for saying that. It feels like there's a difference between going about it the right way and going about it the wrong way. Like a kid from Ohio doesn't have to go to Ohio State, you know, and it feels like he did things the right way. He thought he made the decision that he felt was best for him. So I bring that example up because what are they recruiting for? We don't really know. Like, again, I'm not in the business of telling people they should leave, but like Larry Johnson's old. Like, how long?
What is with you in this ageism?
Well, it's not ageism. It's just like it's gonna be a conversation until he retires.
Yeah, but it's also been a conversation since 2016, and he hasn't retired yet.
100%, and he has recruited really, really good players.
Stop trying to push him out the door, man.
That's why I'm not trying to push him out the door. I'm just saying, like, you have to think, like, okay, is Larry Johnson gonna have say over what the defensive front looks like? Is insert defensive coordinator going to have the say over what the defensive front looks like? We don't know. Is the jack going to get used? Are they going to go to a 4-down front specifically? I don't know. So I just put 2 here. They got Zion Grady and Ipi Satanale out of the class. I think that those are 2 really, really good edge rushers. I like Satanale a lot. He was a late flip. He committed on signing day. He flipped from Cal or UCLA, one of the California schools. So he flips, but I think you need 2 because at defensive end, like you're going into 25 with, you would assume, Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson. Then you have George, the transfer. You have Mickens there, Grady, Kirk, Satanale. It's like Kirk's told me at signing day, we didn't talk to him all year, and I don't think anybody talked to him from our team, at least on media days. He told me when he signed last year that the plan was originally for him to start at defensive end, and then as he progresses, maybe move on the interior, kind of like Edric Houston did.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the plan. Edric Houston was obviously, it felt like going to be a really good pass rusher, and then they're like, hey, wait a minute, this kid might be just a dominant 3 tech. So he moves on the interior. So I think if you had to lean, maybe you feel better about getting, 3 defensive ends and 1 defensive tackle, because defensive ends can always become defensive tackles. I'm not sure defensive tackles can always become defensive ends. But this is to me the second most important position in college football. It is also very expensive to go try and get out of the transfer portal. Quarterback is obviously very, very expensive. Like we all saw what like Carson Beck was commanding, the reports about what Carson Beck got maybe those are true. Maybe those are not. We do know for a fact that quarterbacks get paid. Like, we do know that these kids are getting coin. And it's not hard to say, hey, Carson Beck is making more than Max Clare. Or like Carson Beck is making more than Philip Daniels is at Ohio State, right? Like Will Howard made more than Seth McLaughlin. I don't think that's crazy to just speculate about that quarterbacks make more. That's the way that works in football, right? Quarterbacks get paid more. So after that, though, like defensive line, like that's the position that's really, really difficult to go get. It's really, really difficult to go find like a true, oh my holy goodness, this guy's a first round pick, this guy's a day 2 pick out of the portal. So for me, if you want to extend it out, you can. The reason I just put 4 is because I'm not quite sure what this room is going to look like. I think you're better long term on the interior. Caden McDonald is presumably going to start alongside Edric Houston. But then you have Jason Moore, you have Will Smith Jr., you have Jarquez Carter, Eric Mensah, Trajan Odom, Maxwell Roy. You have a lot of options up the middle. Tywan Malone is still on the roster. You've got options up the middle and long-term options up the middle. Houston's going to be on the roster in 2026. McDonald has the choice to be on the roster in 2026, but if he comes back for a 4th year, you might have 2 years in a row of the same interior defensive tackles. So you're good, I think, at that position, especially with, like I said, with Jason Moore and Will Smith Jr. and some of the freshmen that you have coming in. I think you're good up the middle. The edge is where you might be a little light. It also happens that we don't quite know what type of player they want at the edge.
It might not be light.
We'll find out.
It might not be light.
Yeah, maybe.
It might not. If you're gonna go 3-3-5 it or 3-4 it, if you're not gonna be married to only a 4, and this is the window to do it because you're losing your 4 starters, and it's really a Jack and JT conversation of you had 2 dudes who combined for 21.5 sacks and like 100 and something pressures this year at defensive end. You're not gonna have that next year. Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry might be very good, but you're not going to have the same depth at defensive end this year. And so if you've already started the process of recruiting towards changing that front and you were going to implement it this year, even if Jim Knowles is not here anymore, maybe defensive end isn't that light. Maybe 2 is all they need. Maybe 4 a year is all you need if you're not going to go at it, which is why I kind of – what do you have at linebacker?
At linebacker? This was kind of the marriage of the front 7. This was the hardest part for me. These like kind of 3 positions, defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker. I guess 2 positions if you want to say defensive line and linebacker. I had 2. Could obviously go to 3 if you need like more of an edge rusher. Like you've said a couple of times, like I don't think CJ Hicks is going to be I don't think CJ Hicks is going to be like a pure linebacker next year. But you still have Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. They got the kid Howard out of the portal. Like, we'll see. It seems like he's more of an edge rusher. Then you have Peyton Pierce, TJ Alford, Eli Lee, Riley Pettijohn, Garrett Stover. Like, you have a young nucleus that I think you can work with. And I think if you stick to what you've been doing, you probably only need 2. Because Sonny Styles is going to go, and Arvell Reese technically could leave as well. But even if Arvell Reese does leave, you're starting a brand new position, but then you're talking 3rd-year Peyton Pierce and 2nd-year Riley Pettijohn and 2nd-year TJ Alford and 3rd-year Garrett Stover and 2nd-year Eli Lee. That's when you would expect players of that caliber to play anyway, right? Like Riley Pettijohn, for as talented as he is, the 5-star linebacker, should be ready to play in year 2. TJ Alford should be ready to play in year 2. Like, those kids should be ready to go. So, maybe you bring 3 in for depth purposes if you lose both of them. But it's not crazy to say that Arvell Reese is starting next to Peyton Pierce or Eli Lee or TJ Alford or Riley Pettijohn or Garrett Stover in 2026 because Arvell Reese is still here. So if you stick to what you've been doing, I think 2 is really all you need. I would not hate to see them get 3. I think if you have more of a, hey, this guy's kind of like a down lineman type player, like this guy's more of a jack, then I think you need 3. then I think you need some diversification in your skill sets. So it all depends. It all depends on what they want that front to look like. It all depends on what type of linebacker they want, because like technically, like Will Anderson, the kid at Alabama who now plays for the Texans, he's technically like listed as a linebacker.
Mhm.
Is that the type of body type that they want? I don't know.
I think it is.
That's what I'm saying.
I think so.
If you want to stick with like a 3-down, 2-down backer front, then choose, I think, fine. Other than that, I think you need 3.
I think this is going to be a very large group of linebackers this year. Arvariz is 6'4", Sonny Styles is 6'4", Peyton Pierce is a little bit.
Sounds a little smaller, but
I don't think he's that small. I think you're also like comparing him to guys who have been in college and strength and conditioning programs. Let's let him go through winter workouts and then see what he looks like in pads in March when we're in there. I think Riley Pettijohn is too much with Mick, and I don't think you're going to be calling him small anymore. I think their linebackers are going to be 6'3" and above with James Laurinaitis. 6'2" at the least, because I think Peyton Pierce is maybe on the smaller side height-wise, but he's mixed up for it because he's like super athletic, and there are some guys who really like what he brings to the table, especially for a guy who's going to be going through his first spring because he spent all last year in a walking boot because of an ankle injury he suffered in high school. I do wonder if the Will Anderson, Micah Parsons, the Abdul Carter, because Abdul Carter wasn't a highly rated kid coming out of high school going to Penn State. In fact, he didn't even have an Ohio State offer. He turned into that at Penn State when they realized, oh, we should probably move him from linebacker and put him on the edge, which is what CJ Hicks wants. Please stop making me do middle linebacker things and put me on the edge and let me go get the quarterback. I do wonder if that is one of the linebacker spots, which you said 2. I wonder if that third linebacker every year is a guy who is a linebacker but is going to be an edge if he pops. Because that's what Will Anderson was coming out of high school. That's what Michael Parsons was coming out of high school. And I know those are 2 dudes who are also 5-star recruit, top 10 recruits in the country. So maybe it doesn't always have to be that. But just I'm on the lookout for that this summer when we're out there at those camps. That kid who, yeah, he's a linebacker right now, but he gets here and starts showing some explosive ability, and they go, yeah, we're going to put you over here on the edge. And CJ Hicks might be the first example of that. And let's see what CJ Hicks can do with it this year. Let's take our final break, and then we'll hit up the DBs here on Buckeye Talk.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Did you know a 2018 study showed half of prenatal vitamins tested had unacceptable levels of heavy metals? I'm Kat, mother of 3 and founder of Ritual. When I was 4 months pregnant, I couldn't find a prenatal I could trust, so I created my own. Ours is made traceable, third-party tested for heavy metals, and recently earned the Purity Award from the Clean Label Project. But don't just take my word for it. Get 25% off at ritual.com/podcast.
We're back on Buckeye Talk, the perfect recruiting class, according to Andrew Gillis. And this is about numbers and also style of player. With defensive line and linebacker, I think with linebacker, Andrew, it's probably go get the best guys you can get because that's what James Laurinaitis continues to get. Right. While with defensive line, you probably want a mixture of both. You want highly rated guys.
Right. That's exactly where I was going to say.
Right.
Like defensive end, you maybe want a kid that can be an Edric Houston.
Yeah.
You want game wreckers. Whereas like if you get like a defensive tackle where you're like, you know what, let's put some weight on this kid and let's see. Yeah. Like an Eric Mensah type. Like if you bring in a kid where you're like, you know what, this kid's going to be a project for us in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. You figure that out.
I'm assuming cornerback is like wide receiver, where it's like if Tim Walton says I want him, then you're just going to be like, okay.
Yeah. Some fries for the table. Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I have 3.
Okay.
Because this room is going to turn over, and it's going to be pretty interesting. Because as it stands right now, Davison Igbinosun, Lorenzo Styles, Jermaine Matthews, Aaron Scott, Miles Lockhart, Devin Sanchez, Bryce West, Jordan Woods. That's 8. Davison Igbinosun's not going to play football at Ohio State in 2026. Lorenzo Styles is not going to play football at Ohio State in 2026. Styles, I believe, is is a redshirt senior going into this year, and he does not have the COVID year. I believe this
but
is
also eligibility means nothing in college football anymore.
That's fair.
So I'm not going. Davison, you are 100% correct. I am not going to say that for certainty that Lorenzo Styles is coming into his last year.
Sure, understood. Jermaine Matthews will have the option. It's crazy to say that Jermaine Matthews has the option to go pro after this year, because it feels like we were talking about him just like yesterday as a, wow, look at this young kid stepping into the lineup. And now we're like, hey, he could go pro. For those longtime listeners, like, they know my dad's a huge Ohio State fan. So like my dad and I have this running joke where we're like, man, Chris Olave's 9 years at Ohio State, he was awesome. And we always do this bit about Olave. We're like, my dad's like, I loved Chris Olave for that decade he played with the Buckeyes.
Played for 4 years.
I know, but we do that joke where it feels like he was there for forever. And now we're talking, and then when you talk about these certain kids, it's like Jermaine Matthews, it feels like he was here for 2 seconds. And we're already like, hey, where could he go in the NFL draft? But that's not insane that Davison Igbinosun and Lorenzo Styles are not on the roster in 2026. And then Jermaine Matthews is just a baller and is their best corner next year and goes pro. Let me ask you a question, Stephen Means. Would it surprise you if Jermaine Matthews is their best corner in 2025?
What? Surprised me. Oh, I was getting ready to say I think he's their best corner in 2025.
There you go. So would the starting cornerback, who is, in your opinion, the best corner at Ohio State, him going pro is not insane. So I understand that he might have a little bit of the Denzel Burke or the Davison Igbinosun where they're like, you know what, I'm going to try and boost my draft stock. I'm going to get paid for another year. I'm going to come back to Ohio State. I'm going to see what I can do. Who's to say that he's not looking at the end of the draft board going like, they're telling me I might be a late first round pick. See ya. That's not insane.
So we're going to do this thing tomorrow. It's called the Marshawn Lattimore Malik Hooker Award. And we've been doing it for a couple of years now. And essentially the whole point of the pod is a guy who is coming into his third year here, who for whatever reason, just it hasn't worked out so far. The first 2 years they haven't done a lot on the field. And sometimes it's because of injury. Sometimes it's because they're blocked. Sometimes it could be they've been playing, but they haven't really hit their potential yet, whatever it is. But for whatever reason under the sun, it finally clicks in year 3, the year they're draft eligible, and they go nuclear. And they turn into NFL draft picks. We call it the Marshawn Lattimore Malik Hooker Award because that's who did it first in 2016. Both of those guys went from not playing at all to 2 of the best players in the country at their position. They were both first-round draft picks. Other examples of this have been Tommy Togiai used his third year to turn himself into an NFL draft pick. I know Jameson Williams had to leave to do it, but he also did it, and a few other people. We're going to do that for the Thursday pod this week, the Marshawn Lattimore Malik Hooker Award. Caleb Downs is eliminated because he's been doing things for 2 years. Carnell Tate is eliminated because he was a starter last year, and we consistently said, listen, if he didn't play with Emeka and Jeremiah, he'd have more catches. But that's not him not being productive. That's just him playing with awesome players while also being awesome. We are going to look at the 2023 recruiting class and find Marshawn Lattimore, Malik Hooker recipients. I'm telling you right now, Jermaine Matthews is probably going to be number 1.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. The Marshawn Lattimore Award, to me, as a Washington Commanders fan, doesn't hit my ears as nicely as it does Ohio State fans.
Well, no, because you're getting like the old version of him. You didn't get the New Orleans Saints years 1 through 6.
What I'm saying. Yeah. So yeah, at corner, my point is the room can turn over pretty quick. It's not crazy. You already have Jacob Weatherspoon in the class. We didn't really talk about him because he committed as I was on the plane back from LA after the Rose Bowl. So we didn't really do a deep dive on him, but really, really good corner out of Avon. I think when you kind of map out, where he can fit in this class, he's as talented as any of them. But Tim Walton might not need to leave the state to get another elite cornerback class. And the reason I had 3 was not just because the room can turn over, not just because, it's always good to have as many DBs as possible, but because Vic Singleton is another really, really talented player. He's out of Toledo Central Catholic, number 56 overall prospect, number 5 corner. He's obviously very interested in Ohio State. He's a kid that I think is going to maybe take some time with his recruitment. His recruitment's getting national a little bit. And then there's Elbert Hill. He's the number 1 corner in the class, the 5-star kid out of Hoban, Sam Gurr's teammate. I know Ohio State really likes him. Every program in the country really wants him. Some programs want him to do both. I remember I talked to him, and some programs are saying, we think he could play offense and defense for us. Like, he's that type of athlete. So Ohio State could theoretically sign 3 in-state kids, all in the top 200, 2 of them in the top 100, and one of them's a 5-star, and they are all in the state of Ohio. One's from Toledo, one's from Avon, one's from Akron. Like, this can really, really go well for Ohio State. I think when you look at that room, to me, that should be the impetus, where you bring in 3, because 2025, you're going to have presumably Igmanos and Matthews, and then Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez are going to have a battle probably for that 3rd spot. Maybe Lorenzo Styles sneaks his way into being a slot corner. Maybe he's the best guy that they have at that position. We'll see. But in 2026, the door is there for Devin Sanchez, Aaron Scott, and maybe Jermaine Matthews. Maybe we're talking Miles Lockhart and Bryce West at that point. We'll see how that room shakes out. But numbers are going to flip pretty quick, and I think you need some depth there. But you also obviously could always use as much talent as possible. So 3, if you can get them, man, those 3 Ohio kids would really, really make for a good class for Tim Walton.
So 2 more to go alongside Jacob Weatherspoon. Quick question about the 3, because we're listing off the cornerbacks, and you said 8, but it's really 6 outside corners, because actually it's really more like 5 outside corners, because Lockhart's definitely a nickel. Lorenzo Styles is definitely a nickel, and there's a good chance Bryce West moves inside the nickel as well. Do they need, when you say 3, does one of them need to be a nickel, or are you saying 3 strictly outside corners?
That's a good question. I would lean outside corners, because I think that's what you're probably getting with the 3 kids from Ohio. Like Weatherspoon and Singleton is certainly an outside corner. I think Singleton, I saw a lot of Davison Igbinosun when I watched him play. That I didn't see one penalty on. Actually, I think I did see a penalty on him now that I think about it. But he's very, very physical, very, very long, really, really aggressive. He's exactly the type of kid you want on the outside. I think Elbert Hill and Jacob Weatherspoon are the type of kids that could do both. Like, I think they're a little bit of a Jordan Hancock type mold, where it's like, you know what? This kid's just going to play in the slot, but I think Jordan Hancock was their best corner this year. Like, playing in the slot, I think for many years had this, connotation for receivers and for DBs that you were less than. That's not the case. Like, I just brought up my Washington Commanders. Mikey Sanderstill was their best corner this year. And he's like 5'9", and they had to have him on the outside, but his best position's in the slot. That's okay, because teams run 3 receiver sets all the time now. So I think you're probably talking Hill and Weatherspoon could bump in, but I don't think you necessarily need to recruit a specific slot, because I think, Elbert Hill and Jacob Weatherspoon can play outside, but they can also play on the inside too, and I think you're feeling pretty good about it.
Okay. And last, but certainly not least, a position group who is going to lose arguably the best defensive player in the country after this season. Safety. Matt Guerrieri, as of right now, is still just the safeties coach.
Yeah.
What happens next? I guess we'll find out. Maybe you'll know by the time this pod is out. Maybe you won't. Get the text, 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. No safeties yet in this class for Ohio State. How many do they need?
3. They need 3. I think you need one more year of 3 to really kind of boost that room. Because think about the way that the safety room is constructed right now. Caleb Downs is not going to play football at Ohio State in 2026. Lock it in. He will not be here because he will be playing in the NFL.
I mean, he might be playing in Ohio. We don't know what the Browns are going to do next year.
Yeah, he might be playing in Ohio. He will not be playing. He might be playing for the Bengals. He might be playing for the Browns. He will not be playing in Columbus, Ohio, unless they have a charity exhibition game or something. Unless they decide that maybe they're building the Browns stadium or something at that point. I don't know. I should probably read more Mary Kay Cabot. But maybe the stadium bill's gone through and they're playing the preseason games at the Shoe or something like that. Then yeah, Caleb Downs he just ain't gonna be here. So Where does that leave you? All right, Malik Hartford, you have Keenan Nelson, Jalen McClain, Fahim Delane, Cody Haddad, Leroy Roker, Deshaun Stewart. All right. Well, let's see. You just went from Ransom and Downs to Downs and somebody. Maybe that's Malik Hartford. Maybe that's Jalen McClain. We'll find out. I think Fahim Delane's a heck of a player. I think in my opinion, he's their best safety that they brought in. It's not just my opinion. I think it's the composite rankings pretty much everywhere you look. Cody Haddad seems a little bit more like a long-term project, a little bit like Leroy Roker. Deshaun Stewart, he's transitioning from corner to safety. Great ball skills, really, really talented player. We'll find out how he handles that transition. I know he got hurt at the end of the year of his high school season. I haven't really been able to figure out what his specific injury is or his specific injury timeline more accurately is going to be. So hopefully we'll get an update on that in the next couple of days or weeks. But that's where you're at. Like Hartford, Nelson, McClain, Delane, Haddad, Roker, Stewart. And then that doesn't count any transfers out like you just had with a Jaden Bonsu. So for me, I'm bringing in 3 because you don't know. And you need depth there because your 2026 safety tandem very well could be Malik Hartford and Fahim Delane. And then
McClain erasure is just disrespectful.
Oh, sure. It also could, but I just went with Fahim Delane because he's a really talented player. Maybe it's Malik Hartford and Jalen McClain. Yeah, it wasn't trying to do Jalen McClain erasure. Maybe it's McClain and Hartford. And then you have Fahim Delane, and then you have a question mark. And one of the things that we saw Jim Knowles do a lot this year was like a 3 safety type of look, and you were able to do that with a Caleb Downs. Does insert new defensive coordinator here, like especially if it's Matt Guerrieri, want to continue those looks? Does having an extra safety on the roster really help you? You know, a third or fourth safety that you can play. So for me, I'm bringing in 3. And then, you know, the hope I think for Ohio State would be, you know, 2 is okay moving forward. And then if you really like 3 or something like that, you can bring it in. But yeah, that to me, I think at 26, you need one more year of 3, just like you had in 2025.
So 3 safeties, 2 more corners to go along with Jacob Weatherspoon, the 4-star recruit, 2 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen, 2 D ends, and 2 D tackles, 5 offensive linemen. According to Andrew in this perfect list, they've already checked off their 1 tight end with Corbin Fordham, the 4-star recruit out of Florida. 1 more wide receiver to pair with 5-star Chris Henry Jr. and 3-star Jaden Ricketts. 2 running backs, one of which is, hey, you need to be ready to play in 2026, whether you do or not, and 1 guy who's maybe more of a developmental guy, and then 1 highly rated Elite 11 level quarterback. That's 24 commits in Andrew Gillis's perfect Ohio State 2026 recruiting class. That 24 would tie the 2021 class for the 3rd most ever in a Ryan Day era. By year, 26 in 2020, 24 in 2021. They had 21 and 22 in 2023, 22 in 2024, and then they had last year, 2025, they had 26 commits. So that'd be 24 in this class for Ohio State. Get to text 614-350-3315. Recruiting season is among us as we enter the off season. Andrew will be texting out all news, analysis, everything that's happening in the recruiting world, and especially when June rolls around and we're at those June day camps, those 5 that they hold in June. Get the text 614-350-3315. For Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means. That was a Recruiting Buckeye Talk.